Yo, what's going on? Mike from Mike Talk Sports. In the history of the BMF belt in the UFC, Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal were the first contestants to win this belt, and now the second ones are going to be Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the history of the BMF belt, and I'm going to answer the question, can a grappler ever win the BMF title belt? So the BMF belt was created in promotion for specifically Jorge Masvidal, and the UFC recently partnered with Dwayne The Rock Johnson to sponsor his shoe line and to hype up this non-title fight pay-per-view event. They wanted to create a belt on the line, so they started brainstorming what could we do with this belt, and obviously Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal have this kind of street vibe around them that, hey, anytime, any place, I'll get into a street fight with you. I'll fight you in the octagon. I'll fight you behind the stage if it's Leon Edwards. I'll fight you anytime, any place. And this is where the BMF belt was created. Now, the first BMF title belt bout was so anticlimactic, and it was so funny that a BMF title belt to be the baddest MFer on the planet was ended via a doctor stoppage. Yes, if you guys watched that Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz fight, first off, Jorge Masvidal looks way bigger than Nate Diaz in there, and he straight up is ragdolling Nate Diaz in there, not only in the striking department, but more so in the clinch. Man, Jorge Masvidal was brutalizing Nate Diaz in that clinch, and obviously in a Nate Diaz fight in which the opponent is competent in any way, Nate Diaz is going to be gushing blood and he's going to be bloodied up because we all know the scar tissue from Nate Diaz is absolutely atrocious on his face. All it takes is one good punch and Nathan is going to be cut up for the rest of the fight. And for the first BMF title fight to end with a cut with a doctor stoppage is honestly some weak shit. And Jorge Masvidal, even though he went on to have many other fights after this BMF title bout, he never defended the title, which I think is so lame. In my opinion, the UFC should have at least gone to Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier before this BMF title belt and said, you know what, whoever wins this BMF title belt needs to defend it in their next fight, in their next bout, because realistically, we all know Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, despite being guys who have both won interim title belts in their career, they are both 0-2 in undisputed title fights. They don't want to be 0-3. In my opinion, I don't think they deserve a title shot, and I don't think they get a title shot after this win for either one of them. So in my opinion, Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje's next fight will be for the BMF belt, obviously depending on who wins. But getting into the point of the video, it is very obvious that the BMF belt, the 4 participants that have been in the BMF title belt contention have been all 4 guys where there is zero threat that the fight gets taken to the ground. Now, obviously, Nate Diaz has some really good jiu-jitsu, but he was not going to offensively implement it versus Jorge Masvidal. Same with Jorge Masvidal. Then with Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, maybe they mix in the grappling in this fight considering the last fight was such a war on the feet. But Justin Gaethje has really good takedown defense, and Dustin the Diamond Poirier isn't the best offensive grappler and the best offensive wrestler. So in my opinion, this fight is going to be a stand and bang on the feet. To me, it is very obvious that Dana White, throughout the history of the UFC, really has had preferable treatment to strikers. Dana White is a guy who came up in the MMA world and came up in the sports world through boxing. Dana White's first love in life was boxing. Make no mistake about that. Dana White is a guy recently, in the last year and a half, he was caught watching a boxing fight. I think it was a Canelo fight, cage side at a UFC event. So while one of his UFC main events was taking place, he was completely ignoring a UFC main event, and instead he was watching a boxing bout in which he was not making any money off of, well, except if he was gambling on it, which he probably was gambling on it. But still, if the UFC president is declining to watch an MMA fight, a UFC fight, instead of a boxing fight, I think it is very obvious that Dana White wants to put as many strikers in main events as possible for the entertainment purpose of the sport and just out of a pleasurable purpose of the sport for himself to be self-interested and want what he wants in the main event. I guess Dana White has earned that privilege at this point. But that really leaves grapplers in a bad place in terms of being able to capture the BMF title. While Dana White is still the head guy and it's not Hunter Campbell, I believe that Dana White will never put a grappler in a BMF title bout. But in my opinion, I think it will eventually happen under Hunter Campbell's oversight of the UFC. Now, what I think will need to happen for a grappler to be a BMF title contender, I don't think it could be a grappler like Henry Cejudo or Kamaru Usman. What do I mean by that? Their ground game sucks. Let's be completely honest. They're never going to put a BMF guy in there who is a wrestler, but once he gets the fight to the ground, he's just going to chill in his opponent's guard and kind of work from his opponent's guard. No. In my opinion, it's going to be a Khabib Nurmagomedov-esque grappler who is just absolutely ferocious on the ground. That's a BMF right there. A guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov or a guy like Islam Makhachev who once the fight hits the ground, they're going to go for rapid transitions and they're going to go for brutal ground and pound. They're going to suffocate their opponent on the ground. And that is very entertaining grappling. And I think that's grappling even the common fan, even the casual can tune into and enjoy. So in my opinion, there's not going to be a BMF guy who's going to be this freestyle American wrestler who is really good at grappling on the feet, but it's not that good at grappling on the ground. To me, it's going to be a guy, again, who's going to be throwing up an insane amount of submissions or an insane amount of ground and pound. To me, the BMF conditions in which to fight under is just being rapidly aggressive and overly aggressive and just constantly wanting contact, constantly wanting a war. And to me, a lot of grapplers do fit that description, so I don't think we see it anytime soon, but I think in 5-10 years we will see a grappler compete for the BMF title. Thanks for listening, guys. Let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on the BMF title? Who do you guys think will win this latest edition of the BMF title? And whoever wins, Justin Gaethje or Dustin the Diamond Poirier, are they going to defend that BMF title the second they win it?